Hey, what's up everybody? Rob here from Ram Studio Comics. Welcome back. So in today's video, I want to explain these chains that I created and talk a little bit about this. So for a few reasons really. So I want to show you why I think this can be a really neat way to create. I'm going to make the chains available to you in two different brush packs. They are for purchase, but they're cheap and they come with a lot of other brushes. But I'm also going to show you how I made this, so if you're the type where you don't want my brush, you want to make your own, I'm all for that. I've got different videos on the channel where I explain brush creation, so I'm not going to explain every aspect of the brush creation. You can reference the other videos, but I'm going to show you some of the main things to look out for so that you can hopefully get a more stylized approach and something that looks kind of like the artwork it goes to. Now, I'll admit it doesn't match 100%. This is also a little bit more, or it is more of an inked style than the drawn picture of Spawn in the background there. But I just got tired of drawing all these chains. Like you can see here that I actually attempted to draw the chains at first, and I really wasn't liking the way they were looking. By the time I would have inked them, they'd have been a little bit better. But then I started to think, why don't I just make a custom brush for this? Now, I want to address this. I posted this. This actually got a lot of attention on different social medias, Instagram, things like that. A lot of people, for the most part, were really admiring the brush and wanted to know where to get it. So I thought I'd bring you a video and, again, show you some of the behind the scenes of how you do this. But some other people were really negative about it and saying, well, that's cheating and that's that's not art, and that's just design and blah blah blah. Listen folks, here's the thing. Digital art is here to stay. It's only going to get more and more predominant in the markets. And you have to remember, your most valuable asset in your life is your time. It's the one thing you don't get any more of. If you can look at ways to save time and not compromise too much the quality of your work, and deadlines are getting tighter and tighter, and these books need to be knocked out. If it's comics, if it's storyboards, you have to think about that. So don't hinder yourself by this idea that you're cheating. And also take the time to draw them freehand as well. Just because I'm doing this doesn't mean I won't ever draw chains again. In fact, I'm going to need to draw them a bunch of times to get even this brush better. And the good thing about implementing techniques like this is you're basically recycling your own art. So once you get better at drawing this, you redraw it a few other times, you draw different things, you're getting to utilize and be more productive with your own art. Now, say you're using my brush. I still don't mean for this to be a way where you don't figure out how to draw chains. In fact, I'm hoping that what happens is you practice doing this and you get a better idea of the shapes and the forms, and then you implement your own design, your own chains. And so it's just a stepping stone, if you will. So keep in mind, not every artist draws every single thing on every page. So let me explain to you how you can do this. So the first thing is you have to figure out your design. Okay, so I got to this point here because I started with, I started with some bad versions first that I wasn't real proud of. I tried them, I'm like, it's not it. I was getting closer each step. But it always starts with a rough sketch, okay? So even this over here, to get to this, this brush that does this, I had to rough sketch it over here. Okay, so that's what you see me doing here on this layer. I rough sketch it. Now let me start to the very beginning. This is a 2000 by 2000 pixel document. You can see at the top right there. Okay, so you go File, New. You create a 2000 by 2000 pixel document. That's just the size I like to work at. I start with a grid pattern. Okay, you can go to View, Grid, and you can also adjust the grid settings so that you can get these lines to be exactly on center. Okay, it's pretty easy because they're 500 each. That gives you center both ways, right? So there's that. So I rough sketch it in. I maneuver pieces of this around. I realize that, this isn't going to work because this chain link has to be exactly halfway to match up to this top one. If not, you get a weird artifact and the chain link brush won't work. So you see me here kind of moving these around, getting them just right. Then I ink just a portion of the chain. And I'll tell you, I messed up a couple times till I figured it out. I always do. That's generally why you might buy a brush from somebody else, because you're actually just investing in the time spent that they did all the legwork for you. But anyways, if you hit Command T, it's going to give you a center point. See that right there? You're going to use that to align to your center. And by starting with a solid chain link, this gives you pretty much all you need. You still have to manipulate the middle one because it's on an angle. But what happens here is now that you have center, you can, you would need to, for some reason the selection's bigger than the artwork. So what I would need to do is actually, let me try to cut and paste this. I didn't do it this way, but I just want to show you. I'm going to cut and paste this, Command D to deselect, Command T. Yeah, that's still not truly center. For some reason it's grabbing some of the transparent data, but not a big deal. What you would do though is you would figure out center. One way that I always do it is draw a box over it, crisscross my corners, and mark center, and then cut that in half. Okay, once you do something like that, and there's a number of ways to do it. You can even hit Command R, use your rulers. You can use these boxes. There, again, there's just a bunch of different ways to try to figure this out. And remember, you don't have to keep it this initial size. So you could hit Command T, scale it down to the two boxes here, the grid pattern. You don't want to do this too much. In fact, you'd probably be better off going end to end like this, and I'll explain why here in a second. Leave just a tiny little light gap on each side, because what happens is when you're scaling it up, or you're keeping the initial artwork to its greatest size within this 2000 by 2000 pixel document, you're not going to have as much loss of quality. If you start scaling it down, then scaling it back up, you're going to lose quality. So essentially, once you have this big letter O, goodness, you're going to draw a selection through the halfway point. Get that right to the halfway mark on those grids and delete it. So what this does for you is this gives you the point in which you would need to connect it down here. Now obviously it's way too big to get the middle link and the next link. So you go back to Command T, scale this baby down. Use your rough sketches placement. Remember that's also giving you center to work with, but still keep an eye on your side marks. You can even use those little squares in the back to do it. But just get that in order. And then you're just going to flip one of these. So hold Alt, drag with the Move tool, edit, transform, flip vertically, hit Enter. Remember that you can align it down here just right. You can even go past it. It's not going to hurt the artwork if you go past the canvas. And you can even blue line the one in the back if this is hard for you to see. But what I would do, that's better. I would align it like that where I could see that it almost bunts up. There's a little hiccup right there, but it's not very noticeable. Hold Shift, and now when you drag, it will drag snap to that point. But what you got to do is you got to get it just to the edge. There can't be a gap, and it can't be past the canvas. Reason why, you won't see the artifact until you create the brush pattern, and then you'll have a problem. Now the other thing is this, you got to make sure to keep that original one, which I didn't, but this is just to show you the ropes anyways. But you would keep the original link that you developed, and you would basically use that as a guide to measure the maximum distance. So for instance, the middle one has to align properly to get you to here. So that's about right. You see it pretty much lands on the other one I already designed. So you'd keep that middle link, and then actually what I did on the middle link is I just used Command-Shift-T, which is distort, and I distorted it, but then I just kind of bumped up the size on the edges. Then you got to go through and you have to erase the parts you don't want. So you end up with something like this. Now, once you get it to a point like this, and again, this is just using that one single link and transforming it, and you're basically designing it at this point. But it's all initially off that rough sketch. Actually, the rough sketch probably looks a tad better. But then what I did is I filled it with white. Okay, so the reason being is the really neat thing about Clip Studio Paint brushes is if you fill it with white and black, you can change the colors over here on the left as you utilize the brush, and you can take this brush over here and you can go, well, I don't want it to be white and black. I mean, white and black works great for line art, but let's say that I want everything in the white area to be a slight, bluish, light blue gray, and it kind of preps you for color, right? So you can do all sorts of neat things. I want this darker, kind of grittier gray chain, whatever the case may be. So just remember that. If you utilize the black and white here, you can do that. Now the other thing that you got to remember is to convert this to a grayscale. So you can see this one, let's go to one that hasn't been done. Well, I guess I can still show you here. You go right click, or is it convert layer, and right here it's going to be set to color, I believe, but you're going to convert that to a gray. The reason being, if you don't see this little icon right here to the right, that it's set to a grayscale, it will not color change properly. Now here's the other last tip, and I'll get back to showing you how to utilize it, which is pretty easy, but I'll still show you. And then I'll give you links to 2 different brush packs that this is going to be included in. But anyways, this right here is basically not the last step, unless you don't mind having your lighter color. I always keep my lighter color on the top, my darker color, background color on the bottom, okay? And that gives me the effect I'm looking for right there. But if you have it set like this, it will actually reverse. Now, obviously, I also went through and added texture to this. Where is that final version? I guess I merged it, but basically it's this one. So notice that I inverted that. Really important. So invert is edit, tonal correction, where are you? Reverse gradient. So look, it's Command I on a Mac. So that's what it looked like after I did my little rendering. So you're going to go Command I, and that inverts it, which in turn, by the time you make your end result of the brush, it's going to allow the brush to look like this, versus if you don't, you're going to have to have it like this, black up here, white on there, to get it to look like that. But watch the negative effect that you get, and literally a negative. So you have to invert it preliminary over here before you make it a brush tip. The other thing is this. Let me send that back to the other color tone. Notice that as I textured this, I tried to think a little bit about the way the texture might need to connect, in a sense, to the top and bottom. So as you get to your edges right here, let me go to a G pen and show you what I'm talking about. As you're doing your little scribbles and stuff, you just want to make sure that whatever you do here lines up to up here. Everything that lines up down here has to somewhat, or pretty much, I'll just say it has to line up at the top as well. If not, you're going to get a weird artifact. So notice that all my heavy shading is on the interior of the chains and away from the edges. And on the edges, I simply went to broken lines because I knew broken lines relatively in the same area would read as an intentional kind of rendering. But you didn't see me do something like this at the very edge, because what would happen is this would turn into an artifact as it links together. So just be aware of that. Again, you're going to invert it, then you're going to go to edit. You're going to make sure there's nothing in the background as well. So translucent canvas, the grid pattern doesn't matter. Go to edit, register material, image. You're going to give it a name. You're going to use it for brush tip shape. Now you can see it's only picking up what was on that layer I just added. Let me get rid of that. I don't want to distract you at all. So, because this does get a bit confusing, but after you do it a couple times, it becomes pretty much second nature, like anything else. So, register material, image. There it is. So it should look like that. Again, you're going to double check that you didn't add any artwork below and above the canvas, because you'll see it as soon as you make the brush tip. And you're going to go use for brush tip shape, all materials, image material, brush. So just copy these settings, click, hit OK. I'm not going to do that because it'll add it in there. You're going to name this to something that's easy to search through, because as you start making lots of this kind of your own clip art or whatever, you want to be able to resource it pretty quickly. So you can call it chain links, comic style, whatever. Is that spelled right? Yeah. But again, I'm not going to hit OK, but you'll do that. And then once you do, you go into your brush. You're going to, generally the quickest way to make a good brush is to copy a brush that's already got similar settings. I would take this brush, I would go duplicate subtool, call it testing until you're ready to actually name it, because it's pretty easy to name it after you get it right. Hit OK. You're going to go into the brush settings there, and you're going to adjust things like, do you want this to respond to size, like pen pressure? That gives you the thick to thin, or smaller to larger chains. I'll actually turn that on and off based upon how I'm utilizing the brush. And then also, you're going to want to select ribbon. Ribbon is what makes it link from edge to edge and makes it work. And then the rest of these are pretty null and void, because it's I'll click on each one just so you can make sure that you've got any additional settings set the way that I do. Remember too, the eye allows you to add it over here as a quick select. So things like the brush size, you want to make sure that's on, because then, I'll show you in a second, you can adjust your brush size over here more quickly as you're utilizing the brush. You don't have to keep going into this box here. So boom, let me make sure I hit each one of these. Again, these are just all the settings that I've got for this particular brush. You see a lot of them are left out because a lot of times this is for painting brushes and different seamless patterns. But now once you have that, again, it's going to be in a negative at this point. Okay, so what I want to do here is flip my colors again. Okay, make it a dark here. This could be a dark blue. It could be whatever whatever you want to do there. But let's make that a black. Go back to here. Okay, so now one of the other things is somebody said, well, yeah, that's great, but what about foreshortening? I mean, the reason why people draw this stuff is because they can make really ultra dynamic foreshortened shots, and that's true. I'm not saying that this brush is a end all to every time you need to do chains, but it can be done in a lot of different ways. One way that you can do it is you can use the brush size. It's already checked right there, and you can start off small, not that small, that looks weird, and you can press harder. So you can go like this, press harder. Remember that if you want a really dramatic effect, you're just going to up your brush size, and you're going to press really light and then really hard, and you can't stop though. And you see sometimes you're going to get a weird bending. It's not a perfect scenario, but for the time savings, it's massive. And you see like that right there looks pretty good. Now it doesn't look like it's coming right at camera. So another way we could do that, let me make sure I am on a new layer. I believe I am. Let me make one more just to be safe. Yeah. All right. So another way to do this is you get it relatively bigger in size. You got to be careful on how you apply the pressure. It's got to be kind of gradient or slowly applied, and then hit Command D to deselect. Now I want to show you why I have that selection. I'll show you next. But anyways, hit Command Shift T. Okay, because this is on its own layer, we can now adjust this even further. We can distort it and really stretch the the distortion, the foreshortening of it. Again, it may not be perfect. It may not give you that very ultra dimensional feel you're looking for, but you do have to weigh the time savings in with all this. And if you can get close to what you need, who's to say you can't just blue line this and re-ink over it and really change some things and get that extra dimension you're looking for. Either way, it's still going to help you develop the picture, and I think it actually looks pretty good in my opinion. I would probably work on the it almost looks like I'm trying to bring this chain out, so maybe what I would do is one layer where I curve this in, apply the next layer over top, then distort over top, and I may have to erase parts back. Now last thing, and I'll let you go, and again remember, I'm going to link to these brush packs that I have in the description box if you don't want to go through all this, but if you do, just follow these steps, make your own brushes. It's a great thing to do. You can utilize these for all sorts of neat effects, barbed wire, chain link, various chain links, chain mail, just textures, all sorts of things, bricks. So what I want to do too is show you why selections are important when you're doing this. So notice that the chain looks like it goes behind his hand. They don't look funky behind the skulls, not really. I mean, they look like they kind of connect. I still have to adjust them a bit. I would add some shadowing underneath these. That's because I took the time to first generate some selections. Okay, so if you look closely, I just drew around the skulls, the hand. I didn't even finish up here because I knew I didn't need it to go over there. And that's it. And the other thing is you're going to work with your layers. So like with the bats, I actually started this in a different software in Procreate, so I don't have the layers in this one, but I would bring the bat forward. It just would look better in front of that chain. So you're going to use selections and layers along with this to really make this work. So I just wanted to make sure to point that out. I think it goes without saying, but you never know. So at any rate, that's it. So I wanted to make sure to share this. I didn't want it to be like, hey, look at this chain I made and you just got to go out and buy the set. You don't. I mean, it helps me do what I do, and that's why I set those brush packs up. But at the same time, I showed you pretty much everything you need to do. Make sure to save your documents. You can save this file like this and just keep creating over top of it, so you don't got to keep redoing your grid pattern and all that jazz, So have fun with it. I hopefully you found this video to be informative. I really appreciate the support of the channel. You guys are awesome for supporting and watching the videos. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, and more content is on the way. So as always, keep drawing, keep having fun, and I will talk to you soon.